The apartment on 74th Avenue in East Oakland was silent, broken only by the wail of approaching sirens. And inside, a 19-year-old mother lay dead and shot once in the neck. She had given birth to twins just 11 days earlier, but nearby, her boyfriend stood calm but distant. His phone was in his hand, not dialing 911, but calling his own mother instead. But who was this young woman? And how did a new mother's hope turn to tragedy in less than 2 weeks? What happened in those 11 days, and what secrets were hidden beneath the surface, will shock you. Davonye's early life was shaped by a home marked more by absence than presence. Her father, mother, and brother were all caught in the relentless cycle of incarceration, each leaving and returning in turns that fractured the family's foundation again and again. This constant upheaval meant that the stability most children take for granted was something she never knew. Without the steady guidance of her parents, Davonye was forced to mature far earlier than her peers. She took on responsibilities that no teenager should have to bear, managing the household, caring for younger family members, and navigating the challenges of daily life largely on her own. Her social media accounts quietly told the story of a young girl desperate for connection. Posts begging for her family's freedom, captions pleading, "Free my daddy, free my mama, free my brother," were not just words, they were cries for the family she longed for but couldn't hold on to. Growing up in an environment shadowed by trauma and instability left marks that went beyond what anyone could see. The pain of absence, the weight of responsibility, and the constant uncertainty forged a resilience in Davonye, but it also meant that her childhood was lost to hardship. So, while she moved forward, she carried the invisible scars of a childhood interrupted, scars that would follow her into motherhood and shape every decision she made. By the time Davonye was 19, she had already lived through the kinds of relationships and heartbreaks that many people wouldn't see in a lifetime. Her journey into motherhood didn't start with a plan. It began with survival, with wanting to feel loved, to feel seen, and maybe, just maybe, to build something more stable than the world she grew up in. She met her first boyfriend, a boy we'll call Matthew, through a mutual friend when she was just 13. What began as a connection between two teenagers quickly turned serious, and not long after, she became pregnant. At an age when most girls were still navigating middle school drama and crushes, Davonye was preparing to bring a child into the world. In October 2019, she gave birth to her first daughter, Davonye Cummings. But motherhood didn't magically fix what was broken. The relationship with Matthew began to crack under the pressure of young parenthood, and the promise of support quickly faded. Davonye was left to face sleepless nights, crying fits, and endless responsibilities mostly alone. She was still a child herself, barely equipped to take care of her own needs, let alone raise a baby. And yet, she did it. Then, as she tried to rebuild, she met someone new at 16. He was older, louder, and went by the name Bunga BBMG online. He brought a different energy into her life. He was flashier, more present, and at first, more attentive. Davonye seemed happy again, or at least, hopeful. She shared photos and videos with him, proudly declaring her love. But it wasn't long before that love turned messy. Their relationship played out on Instagram and Facebook like a reality show. However, there were arguments with other women, cryptic captions, and very public feuds with Bunga's exes. The comment sections exploded with drama, and Davonye, never one to back down, defended her relationship fiercely. Even in the chaos, she stood her ground. Despite everything, she got pregnant again. In June 2022, she gave birth to her second daughter, Davonye Cummings. And for a while, it looked like life might be settling into a rhythm. She had 2 beautiful daughters, and despite the online battles and the emotional toll, she kept pushing forward. But then, in June 2023, tragedy hit. Bunga, the father of her second child, died unexpectedly. And though their relationship had been turbulent, the loss shattered her. Davonye mourned him deeply. She didn't just grieve for herself. She made a quiet promise to care for his other children too, proving that even through the chaos, her heart had always been bigger than the pain. Each of these relationships left her with more responsibility and less support. The pattern was clear. Men came into her life with promises of love and help, but what they left behind was struggle, conflict, and in the end, more weight on her shoulders. Still, Davonye never turned her back on her children. Even when she was overwhelmed, even when the world gave her every excuse to quit, she didn't. She fed them, clothed them, held them close, and celebrated their every milestone, often sharing those moments online. Her devotion to her daughters was never in question, even if her life outside of them was filled with instability. So while others might have judged her by the number of children or the relationships that didn't last, those closest to her knew the truth. She was doing her best to break a cycle she never asked to be born into. And no matter how heavy it got, she kept going. For them, always for them. Then Terrence Miles entered Davonye's life when she was still very young, just a teenager juggling the demands of motherhood and survival. He was more than a decade older, nearly twice her age, and bringing with him a past that would prove both dangerous and devastating. At 32, Terrence carried a criminal record that included 5 felony convictions, many related to violent offenses and illegal possession of firearms. He was a man legally barred from owning a gun, yet one would later be found in the apartment where tragedy struck. For Davonye, the relationship with Terrence began with hope. After years marked by instability, she saw in him a chance for something different, a partner who might provide the stability and care she desperately sought. And so, despite the significant age gap and his troubled past, she allowed herself to believe that this could be a fresh start. However, that hope soon collided with harsh reality. Terrence's history of violence was no secret to those who knew him. He was prone to aggressive outbursts, volatile moods, and a controlling presence that steadily eroded the fragile peace Davonye clung to. After Terrence came into her life, changes in Davonye were subtle at first, but grew more apparent over time. Her social media posts, once filled with laughter and joy, became less frequent and more guarded. The carefree energy she had shared online dimmed, replaced by cryptic messages and sudden deletions of posts that hinted at rising tension behind closed doors. Neighbors who lived near the couple reported frequent arguments that echoed through the walls of their apartment. These disputes often featured Terrence's voice dominating the room, his tone sharp and demanding. However, despite these warning signs, many around them either didn't see the full picture or chose to look away. Friends noticed the changes, but weren't sure how to intervene, and neighbors heard the fights, but did not call for help, perhaps thinking it was just another domestic dispute that would pass. In the end, the relationship between Davonye and Terrence was defined by a dangerous imbalance of power and control, an imbalance that, tragically, ended in violence no one stopped and no one could undo. After suffering the heartbreaking loss of a pregnancy in May 2024, Davonye found a fragile glimmer of hope when she discovered she was expecting again just a few months later. This time, she was carrying twins, 2 new lives that sparked joy in a life often shadowed by hardship. The pregnancy became a focal point of renewed optimism, a chance for a fresh start, and Davonye embraced it with all the strength she could muster. And on February 21st, 2025, Davonye gave birth to her twin daughters via cesarean section. The surgery was major, and the recovery would be long and painful. She faced the daunting challenge of healing from abdominal surgery, while simultaneously caring for newborn twins and her 2 older children. Every day brought new struggles, and simple tasks became exhausting, and her body ached from the physical toll. Despite the pain, Davonye's social media posts during this period were filled with warmth and joy. She shared photos of her tiny daughters, captions expressing gratitude, and moments of humor that lifted her followers' spirits. Yet beneath the smiles, subtle signs of stress crept in. Some posts appeared briefly, only to be deleted hours later, hinting at the turmoil she tried to hide. Tension at home steadily mounted during the 11 days following the birth. Neighbors recalled hearing loud, heated arguments between Davonye and Terrence Miles. His voice was often loud and commanding, drowning out hers. One neighbor remembered him shouting words that cut deep. "You had kids before. Why are you acting helpless now?" These confrontations painted a picture of a relationship growing more volatile by the day. As the pressure mounted, Davonye took steps that revealed her fear and desperation. In the 48 hours before her death, she searched online for women's shelters in Oakland and ways to safely leave with her children. She reached out to a distant cousin, texting to ask if she and her children could stay with her, an attempt to find refuge and a chance to plan her escape from the dangerous situation. These digital breadcrumbs told a heartbreaking story. A young mother, still healing from childbirth, recognizing the danger around her and seeking a way out. The hope she once held was fading, replaced by the urgent need to protect herself and her children from the violence that lurked within her own home. And on the morning of March 2nd, 2025, Davonye began her day like any other new mother recovering from childbirth. She fed her newborn twins with gentle care, cherishing their quiet presence. She posted a final photo of them sleeping peacefully, a simple moment captured before the storm. Then, she sent a text to her cousin that read, "I'll call you later. Need to talk." Those words would never find their reply. As the day unfolded, the fragile calm shattered. Tensions between Davonye and Terrence Miles escalated quickly, though the exact cause of their argument remains unknown. What began as a heated exchange soon went out of control. In a devastating instant, Terrence pulled a gun and fired a single shot to her neck. However, instead of reaching for help or dialing 911, Terrence made a different choice. He called his mother first, his voice shaky but urgent, saying, "Mom, help, I shot her. I didn't mean to." The phone call stretched on for nearly 4 minutes, filled with frantic attempts to justify or explain the shooting as an accident. It was a desperate attempt to craft a narrative that might save him from the consequences of his actions. Finally, after pleading with his mother, she called 911, but precious time had already slipped away. When police arrived at the apartment, they found Terrence sitting calmly in the living room, the twins nearby, seemingly unaware of the horror that had just occurred. He directed the officers to the bedroom, where Davonye lay motionless. Forensic experts quickly found glaring contradictions in Terrence's story. The angle of the gunshot wound was inconsistent with an accidental discharge. It showed the shot had been fired from several feet away, not in a close inspection, as he claimed. There were no powder burns on her skin, a telltale sign that the gun had not been fired at close range. More damning still, the gun itself was partially wiped clean, fingerprints deliberately erased, a proof that Terrence had taken time to hide evidence rather than save a life. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Terrence maintained his story of the accident. He showed little visible emotion as police handcuffed him and read him his rights. The twins, innocent and unaware, remained safe in their bassinet, mere feet from the scene of the crime. Following his arrest, Terrence Miles faced a serious array of charges that reflected the severity of his actions. He was formally charged with murder, domestic violence, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, and child endangerment, given that the shooting took place in the presence of newborn twins. These charges underscored not only the loss of a young mother's life, but also the dangerous environment he created for the children she left behind. At his arraignment, Terrence was denied bail and held in custody at Santa Rita Jail, awaiting trial. The court's decision reflected the risks he posed and the gravity of the accusations. Throughout this period, his legal team began to prepare a defense, while prosecutors built their case on a growing body of forensic evidence and witness testimony. Terrence's mother played a pivotal role in the immediate aftermath of the shooting. After receiving a panic call from her son, she struggled to calm him down and eventually placed the call to emergency services. However, reports later surfaced alleging that she took actions at the crime scene before law enforcement arrived, including removing the twin infants from the apartment. These actions raised questions about potential interference with the crime scene and possible obstruction of justice. Consequently, authorities placed her under investigation as part of the ongoing inquiry. Medical and legal experts later testified that immediate medical intervention could potentially have saved Davonye's life. The delay caused by Terrence's choice to call his mother first instead of emergency services was a critical missed opportunity. Paramedics who responded noted that timely aid in such situations is often the difference between life and death. After Davonye's tragic death, the immediate question became what would happen to her 4 young children, including the newborn twins, who had just entered the world without their mother's embrace. With their mother gone, responsibility fell to her extended family, relatives who, despite their own challenges, stepped in to provide care, comfort, and a semblance of stability for the siblings. They vowed to keep the children together, honoring Davonye's fierce devotion to her family even in her absence. The loss rippled through the Oakland community, stirring deep grief and calls for change. Within a day, a makeshift memorial appeared outside the apartment on 74th Avenue, covered with stuffed animals, candles, photos, and handwritten notes. Strangers and friends alike left tributes, many never having met Davonye, but moved by the tragic story of a young mother taken too soon. A few days later, more than 200 people gathered for a candlelight vigil, sharing stories of her kindness, humor, and unwavering love for her children. These gatherings were not just moments of mourning. They became powerful statements demanding justice and awareness. Among the organizations responding was the Black Femicide Prevention Coalition, which adopted Davonye's case as a rallying point for their ongoing fight against violence targeting Black women. They highlighted how her death was part of a larger, preventable epidemic, a pattern of loss that continues largely ignored until it is too late. Their advocacy brought national attention to the systemic issues contributing to such tragedies and called for urgent reforms. Media coverage further exposed the cracks in the systems meant to protect young women like Davonye. Reports questioned how a man with multiple felony convictions had access to a firearm, and why warning signs within the community and social networks went unaddressed. These stories laid bare the failures of law enforcement, social services, and gun control enforcement, failures that ultimately cost a young mother her life. The case sparked renewed calls for comprehensive support for vulnerable young mothers, emphasizing the need for accessible resources such as safe shelters, counseling, postpartum care, and legal protections. Advocates stressed the importance of early intervention when warning signs of abuse appear and the critical role communities play in identifying and responding to domestic violence before it turns deadly. Davonye Cummings' story is a tragic reminder of how quickly hope can turn to heartbreak, and how the warning signs of danger often go unnoticed until it's too late. A young mother, full of love and resilience, lost her life just days after welcoming twins, leaving behind 4 children and a community grappling with loss. Her death shines a harsh light on the urgent need to recognize the signs of abuse, to intervene early, and to build stronger support systems for those at risk. It calls on all of us, neighbors, friends, family, and communities, to stay vigilant and to act before tragedy strikes. If this story has touched you, please take a moment to share it. Raising awareness can save lives. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more true crime stories that reveal the truths behind the headlines and honor the memories of those lost. We remember Davonye Cummings, not just as a victim, but as a loving mother whose life mattered deeply. And we hold space for her children, who carry her legacy forward in the days ahead. May her story inspire change, and may her memory bring strength to those who need it most.